a statement, or let's say an argument about age gap relationships, and the argument was put forward that it's very normal to see, older men with younger women when it comes to marrying down and settling down. And the people on the panel cited anecdotal evidence to support this. And on the show, I actually did refute those claims. Say, I'm sure I've seen the data previously. And
I made a point on an anecdotal example, yes, but my point was that as it exists at a certain percentage, even in the West and in other countries, it exists, and making it sound like it's abnormal, it's not really abnormal. Yes, it's not on average, but the more modernized a society is, the more likely they are to associate themselves with people of their same age, 1 year, 2 year, but it's still not the peak majority. It could be 4 years, it could be 5 years. Generally, women tend to go for older men. If it's 1 year difference, that's great, but generally they would want that. So yeah, we can touch on that.
And that's not the case. Most of the time, people marry when their age range, typically a 3 to 5 year gap max. Now, I did agree that, yes, it's true. Men typically marry younger women. But again, when it comes to this massively long age gap relationship, no, that's not the case. That's an outlier that I see usually in the press and the news. Maybe have some family members, but they're usually, there's always some sort of qualifying statement. It's usually men who are typically rich, wealthy, or famous, or have some, it's always that kind of element to it as the reason why it's the case. I imagine now in the US in 2017. Now, when you break it down, what does it show? It shows that 75% or nearly 75% of marriages of when the husband and wife are roughly between a 5-year max difference. Now, again, yes, the man is usually older. I'm not going to lie about, disagree about that. I'm not going to say the stats are the stats. But that's a 3 to 5, that's a 5-year age difference. Not no 10, 15 years, 5 at the max. And if you look at it even further, the highest proportion of age gap relationship is 1 year. That's 33.9% of marriages in which the husband was only 1 year older than the wife. So this notion, this ideology.
Okay, that's still just a third of marriages. And then of course it spreads out throughout. So 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 10, to 20%. More likely, this is data showing you in segments. If you look at there from 4 to 5 years and then all the way to let's 15 to 19 years, I added it up. It's about 30.6% likelihood of marriages of that age range. As I said in the stream, 5 to 15 years range. Yes, people do date within 1 year or age difference in America. The thing is, it's more common now. It's more modernized now. The more modern a society is, the more likely for them to associate with women of similar age range. And the thing is, it happens because we all go to the same mixed schools, or we associate with people on campus, or it just happens to be that way. But still, it's still 1 in 3 marriages. The other 2 out of 3 is slightly older, 2 to 3 years, 4 to 5 years. And I'm going to discuss that a lot more later about how young couples tend to divorce more. So yes, high marriage rates at a specific age range, but guess what? 50% or more divorce rate in the Western world. And, coming from a society of people that are breaking down, the family unit is breaking down. There's nothing to be proud about marrying someone of the same age or 1 year or the exact month or whatever that means. But again, it's another factor that doesn't need to be stressed on. It's not proving anything. So that was my point in arguing that, why focus on it so much? So if we're trying to push, young men to marry young women and old men to marry old women, of the same age bracket, then that's the problem there. I'm going to show the data again. Next time I'll show the stats on it. But essentially, it says here, before I go, almost half divorces happen in the first 10 years of marriage. The rate is especially high between the 4th and 8th anniversary. The average age at divorce was 45 and 42 for women, which marks a more interesting statistic. By far, the highest divorce rates have been among women aged 25 to 29 and men aged either 25 and 29 as well, and 30 to 34. The issue here is, it delves into more in this article. I'm going to lay it down in the description below, but there's an issue in our community, especially in the West. We are having problems. We are having a dysfunctional family unit, and I'm even grouping myself with a different culture. As an African man, there are certain customs I still hold on to because that's what my family values. I'm not saying that I want to marry someone who is 10, 15 years old younger than me, but I understand why that exists. And if it still exists in the UK, in America, if that's how Africans are moving, it's because a man who is established at a certain age would end up with a woman who is at her prime that can have kids and they can all take care of them.
Come on now, let's keep it real. Let's not act as if it's some sort of, oh yes, that's the norm. We all know what it's about. It's because of the financial disparity that takes place in those nations. Whereas in the Western world, that ain't happening like that. You're not seeing situations where you have high inequalities like that, where women are just pretty much hand to mouth and they actually need guys for food and shelter and all this kind of. It doesn't happen like that. I'm not saying that women still don't want provision and stuff, but it's nowhere near the kind of levels that you see. Therefore, it's no shock to me as to why I see the nations displayed here and the reasons why. So number one, and the biggest one for me, is the financial factor. Now the second one is these are all my belief system, is culture/religion. I'm going to heavily emphasize the religion aspect, because when you look at these nations at the top, Gambia, Burkina Faso, Senegal, all these nations here, they have high Islamic populations, very, very heavily Muslim dominated areas. And what do we know about a lot of Islamic culture, traditions? I know how their religion infuses with their culture. Now, depending on what type of Muslim you are, how you interpret the Quran, girls as young as like 12 can actually get married. And of course, it's to older men. Now, correct me if I'm wrong now, but as long as they've had their menstrual cycle, about their first period, they're actually classed as a woman, because that means they can have children. Now, this was a practice that was done in Europe.
You know, for someone, I'm not a Muslim myself, but I wouldn't really put it down on just religion. I think it's still just traditionally in developing nations. There's really nothing else to go under. To create families is pretty much the way to survive as well. You know, a woman would want to find a man who can provide that, so older men are available. I mean, Muslim practices, they practice polygamy more. It's not based on a man demanding more power. It's just it's more of a utility rather than men manipulating their power. These cultures are different from us. This isn't Vegas. You know, this isn't some type of harem of nations. These people value family structure and community in these communities. Poverty is a driving factor. We want to change things in the continent, and it's a slow change, and it's happening in every continent when it comes to impoverishment. So when we talk on this conversation and kind of look down on it, I look at the Western world like, look what the issues we even have. ADOS community, you know, Black people in the UK, we have issues. We are impoverished ourselves, and we're trying to place ourselves like, oh yeah, we live in the Western world, we're better off. But you're not even part of the system that is benefiting from, you know, the economy. You're impoverished yourselves. High child out of wedlock rates, high divorce rates, no father in the house. Those are the issues we are facing now. And if we're imitating liberal customs, then of course it will get worse. And we want to discuss solutions. And we're looking down on customs like age gap dating. That's the issue there. Someone like Kevin Samuels is promoting age gap dating. He's saying that that's going to be the solution for his community, because he can see the imbalance in that. Young men shouldn't be worrying themselves about, you know, for marriage. They can't even afford the marriage. You should be grinding. You shouldn't be focusing on women right now. Grind your ass off, and then when you're ready, pick what you can.
But if they've had a menstrual cycle, but a lot of these cultural, we would call them old school traits, still exist in a lot of these Muslim territories. And I'm not going to talk about the abuse, and I'll talk about the trafficking and how a lot of these girls get actually abused and used.
Yes, that's the point. You didn't want to talk on that, because that's more complicated. Because at the end of the day, we're speaking on age gap dating, and we're not talking about pedophilia here. We're not talking about 14-year-olds being married off to 50-year-olds. We're talking about the general perspective here. I said a 45-year-old dating and a 28-year-old. That's apparently a large age gap to most people. But what I'm seeing is that if a woman is in her mid-20s or late 20s, she can marry anyone from the age of 30 till 50 if she wants. That's her choice, because it really depends on how established that man is. She's not just going to marry any old man for no reason. So instead of shaming women for doing that and shaming men for doing that, why not focus on the rates of divorce rates, marriage rates in our community in the first place? We have problems. If we want to look for solutions, then actually deal with it like we have problems.
Because of that fact, I'm not going to go into that, but there's a heavy influence on their religion when it comes to the age gap relationship. We just have to keep it real. This is not
I
They
mean,
use
yeah,
this
we,
whole
we can
nonsense
talk
about
on
age gap.
religion as much as I have a very strong opinion on Islam in Africa. Most definitely, I wouldn't take that away. But when it comes to age gap dating, I think that's almost a distinct topic on its own. Um, I've heard a lot of African Americans promoting it in their community because they know that's the only way to kind of improve their family unit. One second. Young marriages are more likely to fail than the quote unquote age gap marriages because men aren't prepared for these things. They're forced into it, believing that this is what they're meant to do, but then it breaks apart because it just wouldn't make sense. Because the major reason for divorces are because of finances. If you're trying to compare yourself you're from a community of people who have a lower marriage rate, a lower, less likelihood to have fathers in the house, and then you're comparing it to a more quote unquote primitive culture of being African, and then saying that, oh, that's a terrible practice. You're taking out of context the issue that's happening in the West right now, even amongst every other group of people. The Western world is breaking apart because we are losing the values that be for a healthy family unit. What's the most important thing? A man has to be a provider. A man has to be prepared to take care of his own family, wife and children. Is he at the right age to do that? And then the same thing for women too. Is it necessary, for women to wait how long until she can settle down? There's stats showing as well. I'm going to list it down below. After a woman reaches her age 30, she loses 85% of her eggs. By age 35, she loses 90% of her eggs. More likely to have children with birth defects and mental health problems. Not saying at all, but more likely to, if she leaves herself having children at the age of 35 or more, she becomes a geriatric pregnant case. We do not want that in our community, and it's getting worse by the decade. If we want to discuss solutions, we have to be realistic. And so if you want to look down on certain practices because you think that looks wrong and it's not the norm, well, we're not white or Asian people. We are black people with issues that are unique to us. Let's define that, and rather than touch on average statistics that have nothing to do with us, when we're the minority, we need to deal with it separately. Look at stats that are distinct to us and make sense of it.